Hello and welcome to this episode of Waypoint, the podcast from AirMed&Rescue. I'm your host, Mandy Langfield. Joining me for this episode is Jean-Claude Siew, EVP of Technology and Simulation at Bluedrop Training and Simulation Inc. Jean-Claude Siew from Bluedrop, thank you very much for coming on the AirMed&Rescue podcast.
My pleasure.
We're going to start off with just a few general questions kind of about the industry. So how is Bluedrop doing at the moment? Are you busy? Are you traveling all over the world to meet new customers and show them what you're doing?
Yes, actually very busy. So we operate both in the services and product domain, but our travel normally takes us wherever there is either a defense trade show or training and simulation more specifically. And we travel now with physical products, which makes the travel a bit more complex because you need to bring equipment and so on. But yes, we've been addressing three markets, I would say now. So in Canada, there's CanSec coming up in next week. We've been at the ITech in London. We are at Soft Week right now. We were at NHA, National Helicopter Association, in San Jose, and we will be in Amsterdam. We'll be in Halifax and other shows around both US, North America, I would say, US, Canada, and Europe specifically.
Well, your passport must be getting nice and full.
Yes, good thing we have a good thick passport.
For sure. So are you meeting lots of new customers as well in these places?
Yeah, so the advantage of going to those trade shows, obviously, the specific markets that we are at, meaning in North America and in Europe, but in those international trade shows, we do meet customers from elsewhere. And these days, Asia also, we're meeting people. So through those trade shows and gatherings, we have new contacts now in Australia, in Singapore, in Korea, in Japan. So we're getting to show off our capabilities throughout the world more generally rather than limited to those. So for small, medium enterprise, obviously we cannot have offices and beachheads everywhere. We're in Canada and in the US, and we have a partner in the UK. But through those trade shows and gatherings, we get to show off our capabilities and many of our products to way more customers, as I said, Asia more specifically these days.
Definitely a region that's experiencing massive growth and investment. In terms of the products that you're showing and that kind of thing, how have those products changed? What kind of simulation technology are you showing? How is it changing? How is it developing?
Yeah, so that's a good question because, as you know, simulation and training and simulation, mainly when we talk about simulators, we always have talked about pilot training. So in our field, we decided to cater to the rear crew, meaning more specifically hoist operator trainers, gunnery trainer, wild gunnery, because again, in those, for example, combat rescue missions and so on, you have both capabilities working in tandem and so on. So we've been focusing on that. Why is it possible is mainly with new technologies. So with mixed reality and virtual reality, what we found is that it helps us have simulators with less footprint, because normally those big simulators have big visual systems, domes, and so on and so forth. And also those technologies are mature enough where quality of the visual, depth of field, being able to measure distance properly with the eyes, and the fact that the refresh rate is much better. You don't get that dizziness that some people will experience. So first of all, the technology is getting there and the technology is providing that. But the second thing we did is we made sure that it was not limited to virtual and where you're grasping thin air. You needed to also have the capability to operate, in our case, the hoist, where it needs to be physical. You need that addition of physical movement, haptics, and so on and so forth. So with those put together, we can now address the rear crew market with those new technologies. So combination of technology, combination of gap in training, well, normally it was focused on pilot. Now we can focus on the rear crew also and provide the same benefits of simulation to both crews, front crew and rear crew.
Absolutely, because crew resource management is a key part of safety, and bringing those teams together, the rear crew and those in the cockpit, to work effectively together is so important. So, and doing it safely in a simulator, obviously it saves a lot of money because you don't need the actual aircraft as well, but it allows for mistakes and reviews. So do your programs and your software always allow for that, for the people using it?
Yeah, so when we thought about the system, the product, we didn't just want to put a product outside and give you the keys and say, now go train. So we wanted to put an environment around it which would permit proper training outcomes. So first of all, we are a training company. We're not just products, as I mentioned earlier. Well, first of all, a training company. So we were very much aware of when we do anything, it has to provide proper training outcomes, not just a gimmicky, good-looking game. It has to provide training outcomes. So that being said, what we ensured is that, first of all, the product needed to provide quality, high fidelity, real-time training. So we can do that through mixed reality and the full haptic system that we have. But also from an environment perspective, what we decided to do is to add data analytics capabilities. So we can measure objectively the performance of the trainees on the system. So we have software that captures data as you're training so that we can give you objective information, real-time information to ensure that you can change your habits or also have the right habits in terms of what you need to do. A simple example is, for example, gazing. When you're in a helicopter and you're on a mission, you need to search and rescue, and you need to pick up someone. Obviously, the person at the back and the pilots are looking at instruments and so on, but there are people looking out and gazing. So, sure. But if you are a newbie, you may just be looking around all over the place. However, what we know is that the way to do it is to use a specific pattern to probably so experts would do a pattern when they are gazing and searching for the person to be rescued, and the newbies may have the tendency to look all around. So very quickly we can show that and say, see what you're doing, see what your experts are doing. That's only one example. There are multiple performance items we measure.
So we talked earlier about the need for hoist training specifically to be very haptic. It's a tactile job. So how did you tackle that problem when you were developing your training solution? Because it was something quite unique on the market, right?
Yes, correct. So we worked with experts, and it's funny, you ask experts, how do you do your job? They just say we do it because they're good at it. But now we try to break it down into pieces. So obviously, being able, as I mentioned, gaze, to be able to measure properly distance and judge distance is one thing. Communication, as we mentioned earlier, is extremely important, how you communicate with a pilot to ensure you're coming on target, but also moving the helicopter in the right direction if there's wind and so on and so forth. But the other part is physically what you are operating with. So what we found is, for the hoist operator, obviously they're tethered, so that's important for them to be tethered. You don't want to fall off.
If they want them falling out, no, that'd be awkward, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then the other piece is the operation of what we call the hoist pendant, where the speed at which you're bringing it up and down. So physically, you need to have it in your hands. The next piece, obviously, is the cable itself, what you're operating with. How do you keep control of the cable, and not having it twirling, not having it just moving in the wind, and so on and so forth. So that, and then the other piece physical is anything around the door, which is for muscle memory. For example, if you feel you need to grab a handle on the right-hand side, the handle needs to be there because that's what you have in a helicopter. You cannot just be grabbing thin air also. So we ensure that it's the complementary piece, meaning not only what you see, the environment you're in, and the malfunctions and so on and so forth, but physically what you need to operate with. So that's where the haptics come in. And we put a lot of time ensuring that the cable physics are exactly as it would be in the helicopter, which would react to what only your movement of the helicopter also, but with wind, with the rotor wash, with other effects that would impact the cable movement, the weight of what you're bringing up, maybe a rescuer and somebody who's injured, a basket or anything else. So all those parameters are taken into consideration.
How do you fake the weather? I mean, you're not pelting them with a hose to get them all wet and a fan to make the wind.
No,
that would be too realistic.
Maybe too. I mean, it can be done, but don't forget you're having electronic equipment around you, electronic for what you're wearing. They have that mounted display, so they all have, I would say, electrical or electronic equipment. So you don't want the street to hose down somebody at that time. However, once you're immersed, that's what we found was really interesting is when you're fully immersed, and as you could see, our simulators, we don't even use motion. So all the both what you hear and what you see will definitely bring you into the proper condition and environment. So obviously, it is simulation. We can simulate any weather, any kind of situation, and so on. But just being fully immersed with the sound and what your eyes, which are the best sensors for a human, you're fully immersed and you feel that you're actually, when we put people into those simulators, two things happen. For one, physically they fight with the system, so they're completely drenched and so on because it's a physical job. And secondly, what we found is that, for example, we have people who are afraid of heights. So they want to try it out because they know it's not that high, because we're talking about, you're a few feet off, and also you can be tethered and so on. But what we found out is that they are so immersed that getting on the ledge of the helicopter looking down, they just can't do it. They need to back off from there and so on. So that's how immersed you will be when you're in that kind of environment, which is so realistic.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of VR stuff, just games, and one of them you have to walk out onto a plank on the edge of a building, and I do have a little bit of vertigo, and it I froze. I will freely admit, and the game forces you to jump off, which is terrifying.
So that's what I'm saying. So while all those sensors are used, I mean, you don't feel anything else. You don't need to actually have wind in your face, and so this can be done. But again, it's what is the training value and the training outcome? It's more equipment, probably more expensive, but for probably a minimal training outcome.
Yeah. On the what you were saying about what you can hear and what you can see, and the rational part of your brain knows you're in a simulator. Do you ever experience problems with users getting nauseous while they're in the program, in the software?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I would say much more, because the quality of the technology wasn't there. But nowadays, the refresh rate is one of the main portion that will cause that, because the refresh rate of the image that you see and so on. If it's like if you're watching a movie, before movies were turning at maybe 24 pictures a second or something like that, or I don't know what's the minimum. So that's the same thing you need to think about, is if your refresh rate was so slow, then you would have that synchronization problem and you can get nausea. But when the refresh rate is very high, it's like looking outside. You don't see you don't see anything flipping or whatever. So it makes a big difference. People who are very prone to nausea probably will still have some issues, But for everybody getting into the machine now, I mean, I couldn't say that it is a problem.
Good. Good. Well, that's reassuring. I'm sure for everyone that's thinking about using them.
Yes.
I mean, you talk about the progress, like the refresh rate is now, is it as good as it can be? What's next? Where are you planning to take it in the future?
Yeah, so I think the refresh rate, I think, is pretty good now. So even if it gets better, I mean, it probably won't be noticeable potentially because it's already very good. Yeah, obviously any improvement will take. I think the other things that are happening is the quality of the visual that you see. Don't forget, you have something which is what, 3 inches of your eyes, 2 inches of your eyes. So the field of view, because don't forget you have this like this. If you look right or you look left, the field of view, looking up, looking down, needs to be can still be improved because to make it even closer. You don't expect to have a bigger helmet-mounted display, but you still want a field of view which is close to what your normal field of view would be. So that's one. And secondly, what your eyes do naturally when you look in one different specific position, that piece is in focus. But everything else, you don't notice it. It's in your peripheral. So maybe it's not as focused as you think it is because you're not focusing on it. And then you focus way out and you focus close to your keyboard. Your eyes do all the work. So again, we need to be able to have that level of high resolution wherever you look. So nowadays, we're close to that. For example, when we wear those helmet-mounted displays, I can pick up my phone when in mixed reality and actually text because I see the little digits and I see the text clear enough. And if I look far, I still see clear enough far. So all those are improvements that are already there, but can still get better. So field of view plus how quickly your focus is good, either close to see small objects, digits, and so on, and far when we look at a mountain and an aircraft coming at you or whatever. So all those pieces coming together.
Lots of people talking at the moment. I was at a conference last week that one of the speakers mentioned it as well, about gamification of training, where you kind of make use of people's natural competitive spirit. I think it's fair to say. Have you got any plans to incorporate gamification into your training systems?
I mean, we have, and again, we need to be careful. So, and as I said earlier, we can take anything and make it a game, but does that game give you the training outcome that you want? It's always that fine line between making it fun and get your motivation up to do it, and versus what you do gives you a training outcome. So we're fully aware of that. So that's why, for example, what I was mentioning before, we do rear crew training. What we do also when we say, we don't limit it to rear crew training, we call it mainly crew training. You talked about CRM earlier. So what we have done is, instead of measuring only one person, we measured 3 people in a armored vehicle, for example, the pilot, the driver, the commander, and the gunner. And then we would put them in the situation and would measure what they do. And for example, how quickly they did detect an enemy, how quickly they reacted, how they communicated, how they engage, and obviously how they performed, and so on and so forth. You can't get to measure that. So what we did is we kept those measurements across 10 different crews, and we could see which crew operated better, not from a negative perspective, but more from a see what you did, see what the other crew did. And then there is competitiveness because the crew obviously wanted to be number one compared to the other crew. So all I'm saying is, and that's what I was mentioning, gazing and so on and so forth, those performance data that we measure, the whole point when I say it provides objective data, It provides objective data to the trainee and to the trainer, so that when you think about it, at the end of a training session, we could say on the 8 hoist operators who trained, how they operated and who came first, who came second, and so on, and show them why. You were good at this, you were not good at that, and so on and so on. But it needs to be on objective data. So when we say gamification, we need, first of all, to be able to measure the proper data, the proper parameter, as aligned to a performance that you're looking for, and then be able to put the importance of each parameter, and then maybe give a rank. And then through that rank, you can say what you did right, what you did wrong, and so on. So yes, we're in that direction, but we want to make sure that it doesn't become a full game, which doesn't give you training outcome. It needs to give you objective information to make you better. Give you better proficiency.
Yeah. The value of the training still has to be there, but I definitely think there's some additional value in, as you say, creating a little bit of friendly competition between the crews.
Exactly. But it needs to be based on parameters that is of importance for your proficiency.
Yeah. And you have to have the buy-in of the client as well. They have to want their crews to. I think also it's an interesting opportunity to kind of compare notes and compare techniques as well around the world.
Yes, also what we found interesting is that when we did that exercise with the armored vehicle, where we had 10 crews do the same mission and could measure them, but they also had an instructor watching them. And the instructor had to grade them too. And we had a good match of how he would have graded them 1 through 10, and how our analytics, if you want, graded them from 1 to 10, because we're looking at the same performance. But before we got to that point, we had to talk to the instructor and ask him, what are you looking for when you train those crews? So that's what I'm saying. You need to have the proper performance parameters that you measure, not any parameter. It needs to, for example, how many bullets you shot, or what's the percentage that actually hit the target, and so on and so forth. So all those things we can measure. And lots of times trainers just do it subjectively because they have the experience to tell you what you did wrong, what you did right. But trying to get those parameters is not that easy. You really need to have a full interview with them to understand what are they looking for.
Absolutely. And you need to actually balance the human part and the human knowledge and the human experience of those instructors with what your data is telling you. So it's the combination of both, right?
Exactly. So, but the most important part is being able to give objective data is key. It's not as if I fail someone because I don't like that person, but because there was some very specific performance data that person did not meet.
Yeah. Well, this has been fascinating. I have just one more question. Thank you so much for your time.
I talk a lot, so stop me when you need to.
No, not at all. It's been really interesting talking to you. I think I just have one more question, which is, what, in terms of what are you most looking forward to doing next? What do you want for the simulation technology? What do you think can be done to improve safety and practice for the people that are flying these aircraft, for the people that are doing the rescue missions? What difference do you want to make?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So I'm not worried about the technology, because technology is evolving. We will always find better ways of using technology and make it as realistic as possible. One thing we're looking for to improve safety is to do what exactly happened for pilots and front crew. So at the beginning, they started with some kind of simulator, and now we got to a point where simulation is integral part of how you become a pilot. Yes, you need to do flight and so on, but that in that continuum of training, flight simulators for pilots is obvious. So any program, any new aircraft, any training, you have a flight simulator and you have but we don't think the same way for the recruit. So today, one of the goals we have is to make it part of regulations, make it part of normal practice. When you think we're going to buy new new aircrafts or new helicopters in this particular case, we just think about the pilot. Why don't you think about the rear crew the same way? Right now, what happens is the rear crew train on static trainers, a hoist on 20 feet high, they try safety, and then next thing you know, they are in the helicopter hitching a ride with a pilot whenever they want to go out. And as we know, every hour of flight will probably provide them only 15 to 20 minutes of real training, because by the time you get out, you come back. But also over there, what most of the times you won't do that in bad weather. You won't do that when a real emergency is happening. You will do that properly in normal weather and so on. So what is true for the pilot, where we train them for malfunctions, for difficult situations and so on, and that's regulated because it is part of the training. That's what we want to be able to put in people's minds, saying, why aren't you doing that? Because then when you think about it, if it's part of the training, both working together also, the safety by default, I believe, should get better.
Oh, that's so true. To always train for the worst case scenario.
As you said, cost is a big issue. So as much as simulator has its place for pilots because of cost, you don't want to fly around and burning fuel and so on. Same thing. And also situations that are really bad. For example, when you need a hoist operator and a rescue, it's always in a bad situation. It's never in a normal. Either in the top of a mountain, you're stuck on a cliff, it's raining, it's blowing wind, and for example, you need to train how to get somebody off a sinking ship. You cannot order a sinking ship and go train on it. You need to get somebody off a submarine. Think about it. You cannot say, Mr. Submarine, could you come up, please, and we'll try something? No, you can't do that. And those are not easy stuff. And on oil rigs and so on, and now on wind farms, you need to bring maintenance people on top of the windmill using helicopters. And don't forget, it must be windy by default if it's a wind farm.
Yeah.
And the windmills going on, so it probably causes turbulence in the area and so on and so forth. So how do you train for that unless you can recreate those situations and so on? So that's why I believe if it becomes part of the training continuum as it is for pilot, that will help safety a lot.
That's a wonderful place to finish our conversation. Jean-Claude, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Always nice to talk to you, man.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Waypoint, the podcast from AirMed&Rescue. Jean-Claude Siew from Bluedrop Training and Simulation, thanks so much for joining us today. Remember, you can listen to all the episodes of Waypoint on your favourite podcast streaming platform. Looking forward to next time.